and welcome back to another episode of Pro Dignity No Doubt. I'm Nicole Smith, your hostess for the day. And as always, I'm joined with a person with a very inspirational story, Roz Slaughter. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Nicole. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we typically like to start back right at the beginning. So what is Roz's origin story?
That takes me back to Long Island, New York. I was born, and my mom was 19 years old when she had me, and I was born with a dysfunctional right leg. Pretty much, I was probably about, I think, if I recall correctly, about 6 or 8 weeks early, and I had a dislocated hip at birth. And I don't know if that really led to my dysfunctional right leg, but it instantly, I came out different. My mom, I feel, was just a little young at the time of having me, but when she had me, we did the best we could. And all I remember from that age is I had a lot of casts for up until about 5 years old. Casts, and I broke them all, falling out of bed, doing all the things that kids do, but just being a rambunctious little boy. And instantly, I can recall just never allowing the leg to inhibit me from doing the things I wanted to do to try to be like other kids. So that's really the beginning of the story. And then, I kind of had a couple different surgeries. My first surgery was a total, I would say, experiment. My mom was young, and she just the doctor said, "Oh, we're going to cut you and put 2 pins here and give it a shot." And I can't tell you, like, when I look back now and as a 46-year-old adult, that surgery had absolutely no chance of success. And it really was just kind of chopping at my leg to figure out, what should they do next.
And this was in the 80s, right?
Yes, it was, in the 80s. And then my second surgery, I was part of one of the first people to have what's called an Alizarov, and it had rings with pins. And the goal was to extend and straighten my leg and then lengthen it. So it took about 6 months to straighten my leg. And I was excited because, I was going to be normal. I was going to be like all the other kids. I could run and play and do the things that they would do. And I didn't have to be on that little short yellow bus that I had to take to school. And we went to Springfield, Mass. And 6 months of being in the hospital, and I lived there pretty much alone because my mom didn't have the finances to come in and be there with me. And so you can imagine 11-year-old, boy at a hospital, 6 months. But, by the grace of God, I was, just inspired that this was going to work, and they straightened my leg.
Oh, wow.
And at the end of that surgery, I got to speak to the doctor, and he's like, "Oh, it was a success. You have a straight right leg." And I'm like, "That's amazing. We're going to let you go home for 2 weeks, have a break, and then we'll come back and you'll do the second part where you'll lengthen your right leg." And, just an average question I asked, I said, "Hey, doc," I looked up at him and I said, "How will my leg stay straight now that we have it straight?" And he casually said, "Oh, you're going to wear a brace." And I asked him, "For how long?" And he said, "For the rest of your life." And as I took that in, I go, "Well, I don't recall coming here in a brace, so I don't know how this is fixing me." And if any of your listeners can remember Forrest Gump, those types of braces.
Legs, yes.
And the magic legs. So he let me go home for 2 weeks and stay with my grandma in Long Island, and I never went back. So
I can understand why.
Yeah.
And physically, how did things turn out? So obviously there's a lot of a distance between the 11-year-old Roz and the adult one. So what does life look like? Or what was the transition,
The transition was, my grandmother had a strong faith, and she said, you were born this way. God meant you to be this way. And I believe that and still do to this day. And I just used my leg to be kind of ability. It was something that if you told me I couldn't, I would. So I schools, a lot of doctors told me I'd be in a wheelchair by the time I'm 18. I'm excited to tell you that I'm not in a wheelchair. I'm able. I just completed riding a bike with one leg for 100 miles on Saturday.
Oh, wow.
And I went on to do a lot of things athletically because everyone said I couldn't. So I wrestled in high school, in college, and I became a personal trainer because, in New York, because they said, oh, you know what, we don't have any disabled personal trainers. And I go, well, I don't know what that really means. There's a lot of
Yes.
average people or normal people who need inspiration and motivation so that they can change their lives. And I'll
Mhm.
be that catalyst.
Yeah. Amen to that. Well, and there's this conversation around able, disabled. And I always kind of bring up the fact that I have two daughters, one that was normal path, one not so normal. And society typically looks at my oldest as if she is of greater advantage over that of my youngest. And when you go through this, I know you did personally too, is there's a grieving process that comes along with having unmet expectations. We expect that things can go the right way and we can be normal and everything will be grand, because that's really what we all desire in life, right, is this idea of normalcy and that kind of stuff. And as I was grieving sort of this unmet expectation with my youngest daughter, it was this realization that society looks at my oldest as being the advantaged one, but really the more advantaged one being my youngest, because she has an intimate relationship with struggle. We all need struggle. Actually, we don't like struggle, but we all need it. That's where personal development and growth comes from. And so I this just kind of realized, yeah, I have to falsify struggle for my oldest, where my youngest has this intimate relationship with it, and to persevere and to always constantly be in a state of self-improvement, because that's just so. Do you feel as if, I mean, honestly, just knowing very little about your story, seems like, disabled is not a word to describe you.
No, absolutely not. I was actually sharing with a friend of mine recently, and they say sometimes if you lose your sight, your hearing is improved. If
Oh,
you
yeah,
lose,
yeah.
your balance, something else is improved. For me, I do truly believe that God just blessed me with a growth mind.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that growth mindset allowed me early on to see obstacles and turn them into opportunities, no matter what was in front of me. And that's what got me through some tough times in my life, whether it would be learning challenges or economics that were just social. We didn't have any money and growing up very in a impoverished environment, to just always seeing the blessings and the lessons and the
Yeah.
obstacles, and now I get to do that.
Yeah, and as I am to understand, there's more to your story than just, the challenges that came with your, physical. So
Absolutely. I mean, my mom struggled in the 80s. She was addicted to crack cocaine. And growing up in upstate New York, it was a very, I would say, just a cold, dark town.
Mhm.
And I had to navigate and learn a lot really early. There was many nights where, she would go out and party and leave me home alone and things like that. But as I've gotten to be my own a parent and an adult, I released any energy that was negative toward her, because I understand that it was just really, she was where she was doing the best she could from with the programming and the life that she was trying to live.
Yeah.
And I see those challenges today as kind of my blessings. Like you were saying, that struggle has
Yeah.
kind of fortified me into the man that I am today.
Yeah. Well, and what do you say to others that are struggle with holding on to bitterness with regard to parents that lived a life that wasn't fully in dedication to the development of their children?
What, Nicole? That's an amazing question. Thank you. I would inspire them to kind of release and understand that we have our own path, and
Mhm.
we have to be the author of our own stories.
Mhm.
And if we allow anyone else to dictate that, if we hold on to that and anchor it down, we
Mhm.
become those negative beliefs, those
Amen.
negative feelings. And when you release that, it's freedom in that. It's
Mhm.
freedom in not believing that you have a disability. It's freedom in not believing that your circumstances will equal your outcome and your destiny.
Mhm.
It's freedom in that. And when you start to embrace that, you'll attract everything you need in this world to actually say, hey, I think that, we have to release any bitterness about what our upbringing was, what lack or challenges we had to overcome. And
Mhm.
we all will get through and be able to become the author of our story. So like whatever that story is that your listener is listening and thinking, oh, you know what, I'm stuck here. I'm not able to, I have, this is my story. I was abused. I was raped. I was, whatever that story is, once you get
Mhm.
empowered to release it, it will give you the power to move forward in life.
Yeah, and I really agree with that on multiple fronts because I think when you're going through these moments, it's easy for you to sort of project that on the individual, almost as if, well, you're giving that person a pass when the reality is it has nothing to do with that person at all. Forgiveness
Absolutely.
is about your own inner journey towards something beyond that moment. And also the reality too that when you go through these types of struggles, especially if you're experiencing something later in life and you have this idea and expectation of what normal is, right? And this event happens, someone hurts you, you make poor choices, nature sort of knocks at your door and bad things happen, right? You want to go back to that state of normalcy of what you believe is normal, but the reality is you're something else beyond it. You're never going to be that person before. All you can be is the person that you are now and move forward towards something. So how would you advise people to, really embrace the new person that's in front of you and make that best case scenario of embracing you as God made you and intended you to be, right?
Absolutely. I think the first step is developing an intention to go through growth. You have to
Mhm.
really seek out growth. You can't, because if you stay where you are, that's where you're going to be. And I started reading books. I started to go get around other inspired and motivated people. And that allowed me to go, oh wow, I'm learning from that person. I get to see what you did and what you came to. And then I realized, you know what? I'm not on Roz Island. There are a lot of people who have their own
Oh,
struggles that
yeah.
are really worse than mine. And I
Mhm.
say worse than mine because it's only my perception, but it's like we all perceive that we are the only ones going through something and no one else understands. And then when you
Not
find
your
someone with
struggles.
a story, you're like, wow, you know what? It
Mhm.
wasn't that bad.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, like, the mission why I started a nonprofit with, and, a podcast with this kind of idea is that a lot of times it's knowing that you are not alone in your struggle that's very helpful, and needing to strike that balance between an awareness beyond a perspective beyond your own little box that you've put yourself in. Because when you're in this box, you can get so bitter and woe is me, life is terrible. And it's a very human thing. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure you felt like this too. You've had these moments where, you just sort of waller, those are very important moments to waller is grieving. So grief is a process, grief is a journey. You kind of have to go through all the steps, right? But you also have to embrace personal development as a journey too.
Mhm.
So I don't know, personally, I've had these moments where I like try to swallow the elephant whole. Like, I just want to be better and like all the ways, like, let's get through this. Like, we're going to do this. But I think what you're saying is, taking those bites, the increments are really purposeful towards that journey. And so what did it look like for bites? You said you started with books, what other things?
Yeah, it's first. I mean, I guess I'll share with you this story. I struggled reading for my entire life,
Mm.
and it
Ugh.
was something that was, my grandmother had a second grade education. My mom didn't graduate high school. My
Mm.
uncle never finished high school. So all the people that were in my immediate circle didn't see academics as really important. And so
Mm.
I didn't have anyone to help me. And I remember I was 18 years old and I met a gentleman and he gave me a book called The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz.
Oh, wow.
and
Okay.
and that changed my life because I at that time it took me, I can't tell you how long, but it's only about 120 pages, but it took me a really long time to read that book. But what that book did was a seed that it allowed me that I could think differently, and if I set the seed of
Mm.
different thinking, I could become anything. Now I'm an avid reader. I've written 3 books, and I share that not to impress but to say, hey, you know what, those, like you were saying,
It's a
those small
journey.
bite sized, each day
Yeah.
I got a little bit better, a little bit better, taught myself how to read, taught myself how to really understand and comprehend what I was reading. And
Yeah.
that was part of my journey.
And what you surround yourself with too. So something that I'd like to encourage people or listeners that maybe haven't like walked these sorts of paths of struggle, at least physical, mental, emotional traumas, right? Is that like get the theme. Like all these stories that you hear are very purposeful people pouring into other people's lives in very purposeful ways, you know. So I actually was in special education as a child, and I didn't read on grade level until I was 12, 13 years old, until I got a tutor that understood that I was a creative being. It wasn't that I wasn't intelligent. It was just that my brain worked and functioned in different ways. And so as soon as she got a hold of this, and also when you're really like crushed for so many years, your motivation is, you know, like, why would I even try? I've been trying it, you know. So you know, she reinstated this motivation through various different tools. So it seems like, you know, sometimes you need the person that comes and like presents you with this opportunity, but what really matters is you taking that and doing something, making a self-motivation. Like, hey, you know, like you get hungry. It's like when you can't do it, you're like, get hungry, like to move forward and make a difference beyond that. So 18-year-old Roz like gets this book and he's feeling transformed. So what are those next steps in your hunger?
Oh man, well, the next step was, you know, physical. You know, it was okay. Now, what do you do that you're out of high school, right? College is that next step, but it was difficult because I was taking care of my grandmother at the time. I was working, and I had to find a career path that would allow me to just start to blossom. And it was personal training. I had a friend of mine who became a personal trainer out of high school. His uncle was a manager at a gym. I asked, could I get a job there? And he was hiring people, but he said, "Hey, you know what? We don't have a personal training position right now for you." And although they were hiring people, they didn't have one for me yet.
For you.
And exactly. But he said, "You know what? We do need someone at the front desk." And I was like, "Well, you know what? I'll take it. Let me in. If you open the door, I'll kick it in." And I got that job at the front desk, and I learned everyone's name, and I learned everyone's kids' names, and I just became that person who lived in there. I was a gym rat. And I got certified, and within a short period of time, people were asking him, "Oh, I would love to work with Roz. Could I train with Roz?" And he was like, "Well, he's not a trainer." And I was like, "Well, I am certified, and all I need is an opportunity." And that was the start of my career in fitness, where I took my disability and shared with people how they could, you know, inspire and motivate the change of their bodies and minds. And, you know, that led on to over a 24-year career in coaching, opening 5 gyms, and just really being the catalyst to inspire my clients to, hey, your limitations are only yours. And if you release them, you can do anything. If you hold on to them, they're yours.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, in this Western world of an entitlement, there's this, and I don't know, maybe it's like the 80s, 70s, 80s kids that really kind of straddled this, but like my dad worked in a orthopedic baby shoe factory when they were first married. My parents were first married, and, you know, he's worked his way up. So it's like, you're only entitled to what's in front of you and the hard work that you put forward. So having like this really strong awareness of work ethic and being okay with starting at the bottom, because I'm sure throughout that process of starting at the front desk, you learned a lot of skills that you would have never learned that have built into that success of opening 5 gyms. That's crazy. That's amazing. So how did you even get started in going from a personal trainer to actually business ownership?
That's a good. These are all the stories I think your listener and we all have them, right? I mean, I was working for one of the big gyms in New York City called Equinox, and my grandmother got sick with cancer, and I had to take time off to go and tend her to help her out. And I thought, hey, this company I pour into. I got so many clients, not a big deal. I came back after 2 weeks, and they had basically cut my health insurance. And they said, well, if you drop below 40 sessions for 2 pay periods, and she had been sick, so I didn't know that I had dropped. I was doing probably 60, 70 sessions a week, but I had dropped down during this time, and it devastated me because, you know, having no health insurance, knowing that this was going to be something I needed help with, helping my grandmother, she was on my policy. And I decided at that time that I was never going to allow someone else to dictate my future. So I became an entrepreneur. I gave my notice. That was probably February, March of 2007. And I said, I'm walking away on January 1st of 2008. And I'm never going to be held to that, you know, captive again. And
Yeah.
since 2008, I've been an entrepreneur myself.
Oh, wow. And I'm sure along that journey, you've realized that that work ethic really pays off, in entrepreneurship, that there's a lot of ups and downs. My dad's an entrepreneur, so I can understand. And that's kind of the future I've paid my way with as well. So there's a lot of twists and turns in that. So what made you think, hey, I should start my own gym? Like, how did that go?
So I invested $2,000, flew to Dallas, Texas to go to a personal growth event that had the legendary Jim Rohn there.
Okay.
And if any of your listeners know, Jim was a business philosopher, an old school dude that just kept it really simple. And I was at that event, and I got invited on stage, and Mark Victor Hansen from Chicken Soup for the Soul fame asked
Mm-hmm.
me, "What are you going to do when you leave this event?" And I said,
Mm.
"I'm going to start my own business." And he said, "What business?" And I said, "Well, I'm a personal trainer." And he goes, "What's going to be the name of that business?" And the name of the conference was Breakthroughs to Success. I said, "Breakthroughs to Fitness." And that was the beginning. I literally got out and running. I did not know anything, had no mentors, didn't know anything about business.
Yeah,
All I
yeah.
knew is that, if I had a handful of clients from Equinox, I called
Mhm.
them up. I said, "Hey, I'm going to be leaving, and I'd love to give you a discount if you come across the street with me. There's an independent gym. I'd love to continue our relationship." And I had at that time about 35, 40 clients, and 28 of them decided to come across the street with me. And that was the start of my
Oh,
fitness
wow.
career.
A little bit of poaching can go a long way. They're yours.
Hey, I keep it real with you. Like you have
Yeah,
to do what you
yeah.
have to do in that survival mode.
Yep, exactly. Well, and you had a lot on your plate at the time too. So, and you built those relationships. So I can understand. So, building that was, you were your only person, right? So did you start to
Absolutely.
add on other personal trainers? What did it look like to grow that business?
Yeah, I mean, very quickly, I got a name for myself, and and then I brought on a buddy of mine who was a local trainer who he didn't have any clients, but I just felt, wow, this guy is just a good dude,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he was one of those people that was salt of the earth at the time, and I said, "Hey, I don't have any money, I can't pay you what you probably are worth, but if you buy into this vision, what we're gonna do is we're gonna build something really positive." And he
Hmm.
believed in it at the time. And within a short period of time, a couple of years, we built the Breakthroughs to Fitness, and we turned it into what was later called Metaburn Fitness. And we
Okay.
had several different gyms, and we were very successful in transforming thousands of lives with a unique system that we created. And then 2018 comes. So fast forward for your listeners,
Yeah.
2018, I want to move to Florida. No longer do I want to be in the cold. I moved to Florida, and I started a gym here, and everything's going great. I mean, I just know this stuff. I've learned it. I'm using everything of all the personal growth, studying Tony Robbins, everything.
Hmm.
And then we all have another turn in the world,
Yeah.
2020. And I'm sure your listeners all know, a pandemic, and
Yes.
the world shut down, and so did my
Especially for
business.
fitness, yes. Yeah. Well,
and
it's not like it did, but it just changed dramatically, yeah. Lots of alcoholism was
Yes,
a
lots.
priority during that.
You can't tell you. Like I had clients that they were crushing life, and they had everything going, and then boom, myself included. And on March 20th, I closed all my gyms completely down at once because
Oh, man.
I just did not know what the future held, and didn't want to keep people's lives at risk. We
Yeah,
had 8
yeah.
trainers, and we had an assistant, and all these things that were going, but they required income, and we had
Yeah,
none coming in.
yeah. Oh, man, so what has the last 4 years been like?
The last 4 years have been a true blessing. Like when one door closes,
Yeah, reinvent
another.
thyself, open other doors, yeah.
Yeah, I'm blessed that my wife allowed me a couple of weeks to kind of just have a moment to trust my faith, and pray on some things. And I said, it's time for a new chapter. It's time for
Mhm.
passion. Like yourself, I had some time to listen to some of your episodes and go through your website, and I no longer wanted to chase money. I no
Yeah.
longer wanted to be this guy that's like, oh, I gotta have, because when I was in fitness, I became kind of like a guru. So
Yeah,
people
yeah,
were
yeah.
on social media, where are you going? What are you doing? What car you drive? And
Yeah.
I didn't want that life anymore. And I said, what would I do if I was 13 and I sat
Aw.
down and I said, I need this book. I need to know what success really means to me. And I want to
Mhm.
be able to inspire other young boys who may not have a father like I did. My father left my mom while she was in the hospital, that have no mentors, that just really don't know
Mhm.
what the North looks like for them. And
Mm.
I sat down, and within probably 3, 4 days, I poured out my book called Student Success Secrets.
Oh man, that's amazing. And you're right. I It's definitely needed. Young men definitely need that encouragement to build up the next generation of fathers that really can be encouraged for themselves, but also for their children. It's very, very important. So, like how long did it take you to publish it?
It really, like I said, I mean, I put my heart and soul into it. And then I had my wife, who always had a dream of writing a book. And I said, why don't you co-author this with me? This could
Oh,
be a chapter
good.
that we do. And we sat down, and within probably about 8 weeks, I had the knowledge. So you know how once you acquire knowledge, you never lose it. So I
Yeah, yeah,
knew
yeah.
what to do. I self-published 2 books before, but those books weren't passions. They were
Okay.
purely about
Yeah.
profit. And so
Gotcha.
I rarely even talk about those, but Student Success Secrets is that book for me that, when I was 13, I needed, and we put it out there and we launched it. And with and it's exactly what a lot of your listeners are probably going through. There's always going to be twists and turns. That
Mhm.
2 weeks before launching, someone hacked into my Facebook account, and basically I
Oh,
lost my audience. So I was like, oh, I could have just thrown my hands up and said, you know what? It's not meant to be. I was
yeah.
like, no way. Let's
No,
just
no,
figure this
no.
out. And I got on the road and just went out and started sharing. Hey, here's a book. If you have a boy, I'd love to give you this book here. And we
Yeah,
just got
yeah,
it out that
yeah.
way.
Well, and I think that's one of the again, it's a journey and it's a path, right, that you're on, and you're going to. Nothing that you can ever do, and I'm sure you heard this in other episodes, I say this a lot. In the Western world, we think we can success our way out of struggle. And there is no way to success yourself out of struggle, period. It will find you in whatever form, because we're in a very deeply fallen world, and it's fallen in our nature and in nature's nature. That's just where we're at. So accepting that at the front end is very, very important, so that when moments like someone hacks into your Facebook account just right before launching a book that's like into your passion, into the next phase of your life, that you can feel a deeper sense of meaning, you continue to push through, because it's a journey. And so I will ask this question. So we came from the what I call the movie reel generation, right? So we believe this idea of like the movie, where you have the ups and downs, and then that's the end of your story. And now we're into like the TikTok reel generation, which is like 15 of like ups, downs, and then done, right? But really the hardest part of life is the terrible in betweens, right? So how do you keep motivated in between when there's all this space that you can use to do something that can benefit you down the road? Because it's a journey and you got to keep your eye on the prize, right? But sometimes it's not just tomorrow or a couple weeks from now, sometimes it's years from now. What would you say to people that through that journey of the long haul, keeping focused on in the day-to-days?
That's a very easy question for me, because I just go back to past mentors. And I say
Mm,
mentors being my books.
mhm,
Anytime I hit rock bottom, or my rock bottom at that moment, it's
mhm.
easy to go back. I have a library, and I go back and say, hey, which one of these people who have overcome something is going to inspire me to push
Hmm.
through? And, Jim Rohn pops into my head always, because he said something great, which is, you have to have a why. When you have a
Oh,
why
yeah.
that's willing to make you cry, then there is no obstacle, there is no challenge, there is nothing that's going to stop you from getting up early and pushing forward for that day. And I know
Yeah.
you're a mother. I'll share with this. One of my first clients that I worked with had CP,
Mm,
and I had never worked with anyone with CP before.
yeah.
And his mom called me, and she introduced herself, and I was like, wow, you know what? I have to humble myself and tell you that I don't know. But she said, you know what? Your story, I believe, is going to inspire my son.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then we went on to have a 4-year friendship that's just been so
Oh.
blessed. And he's
Hmm.
had such an amazing turnaround. So there's kids like him out there that make me go, you know what? Doesn't matter how I feel. Doesn't matter if my knee hurts today. Doesn't matter if my back hurts. Doesn't matter if I don't want to
Yeah.
get up.
Yeah.
Get up, Roz. Do what you do, because there's someone else out there that needs to hear your message today.
Yeah, and I think it's like there's a Dolly Parton quote is every day you wake up and be yourself on purpose. Like as I butchered it, but basically it's like, yeah, it's a daily choice to wake up and decide that you're going to commit yourself to your why, and a why that makes you feel passionate about making it the next day and the next day and the next day. And sometimes that's really, really hard because to some, the why is very apparent.
Hmm.
And especially in life transitions, because we'll be different versions of ourselves from the very beginning to the very end, right? How is it that, well, seeking God, obviously, that seems like it's a very active part of how you decide what your why is. How do you help people decide what their why is?
I listen. I ask them questions and I listen. A lot of times, something that my grandma shared with me is that if you learn to listen to people, they'll tell you what they really need from you rather than you telling them what you want them or believe that they need. And
Mm-hmm.
so I listen to people, and it doesn't matter if it's a team that I'm mentoring or a parent that I'm coaching or my sons. At the time, you just have to listen, and you have two
Mm-hmm.
ears and one mouth. So if you listen twice as much as you speak, you're going to hear and get the answers you need.
Yeah. And I call it the ministry of silence too. Sometimes it's best to not open your mouth. But through mentorship, obviously listening, but sometimes speaking does more damage than it does to good because you're sort of inserting what you believe that it should be. And so when people are going through hardships as well as redefining themselves for the next step, I think sometimes not inserting yourself into it is the best thing too. And so opening your ears and shutting your mouth has some benefits on multiple fronts. Also, when you do open your mouth, praying that God, you are his mouthpiece and you aren't inserting yourself into it as well. So, man, you've had a journey. So there's one thing I did want to ask as well about your journey. You didn't really speak to. How did you meet your wife?
Great question.
Yeah,
Yes, she was a client of ours, of my gym,
of
and
course.
this, yeah, but I would love to say that was, we didn't like each other. We did not like each other when we first met, because my personality, and what a lot of your listeners probably are taking from this is, I believe in getting up, doing your thing,
Hmm.
not being a victim, overcoming that mindset of woe me. And she came in and she was having a rough time. She was a divorced mom
Oh,
of 2 boys, and she was kind of like, well, I can't do it, and this is in my way, and I have to work, and all your other clients don't have to do this. And I just said, hey, I keep it real with you. That's your excuses, and if you want to keep them, you can have them.
yeah.
And she got really upset. And the funny is, I wrote an email to our list and telling us this fictitious story, but it was really about her. And she read this email, and Nicole, I'll tell you, she was mad. She
Oh, I
was mad.
bet.
But it didn't have her name or anything, but she knew. And then my business partner at the time was getting married, and he invited a couple of our clients, and she came as one of their guests. And so I wanted to make sure that this wedding was perfect for my best friend. So I went over to her and I said, hey, I want to make sure you have an amazing night. Can we put everything that we've had in the past under the bridge? And that evening, we just had a great evening, laughing and
Aw.
enjoying the event. And the rest is history. We're 10 years in, and we're still married happily.
Oh goodness, is this a reoccurring theme in marriage? I'm imagining those. Marriage has conflict sometimes, and I'm very opposite to my husband as well. He's very quiet and introverted and non-communicative. So, oh, I bet you got some rip roaring ones in there over 10 years.
Oh, absolutely. We are definitely polar opposites, and I'm logical. She's very emotional,
Yeah,
but that makes us strong because
good
we get to
balance.
learn together.
Yeah, yeah, and you definitely grow in that. So, you guys have been married for 10 years, or have you been
We've been
together?
married. We've been together 10 years, married for 8.
Oh, wow. Well, congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome. And so two kiddos from a previous marriage. Do you guys have any
Correct.
kiddos
We
together
don't.
too?
Not yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so now you're at this point that you're in a new transition. So you've written a book, and what are you doing now?
So now I took that book and I really turned it into my passion. And I get to, when you are blessed to have a 9 and a 12-year-old come into your life overnight, you have to learn and you have to adapt and evolve. And so I took that really serious because I didn't have a mentor or father in my life. I didn't want to replicate the cycle that I had seen. So I did what I always do. I went to books. I went to mentors. I hired people. Hey, how do I become the best stepfather ever?
Yeah.
And I can tell you that I would love to be like, listeners, I have run into the wall 60 miles per hour, learn, adapt, and evolve. And so it led me to wanting to be in this world of helping others navigate, whether it's a parent who's struggling with a teen who's lacking confidence, going through a challenge with social emotional skills, maybe learning disabilities, being bullied, because those are all things that I had to persevere through. And I created like yourself, a movement called the Unstoppable Teenager Movement, where I want to eradicate bullying. I don't want kids to be bullied anymore because they're not the way that society says they need to be. We all have our unique differences, our strengths, our limitations. And when we learn to embrace those, then we can shine. So that's what I do today. I help teens embrace their unique abilities so that they can thrive, whether in school, sports and performance, or just in life.
So how do you think that you eradicate bullying?
Beautiful question.
Yeah.
I take it back to, it starts with, Carl Rogers' self-concept, understanding your self-image. And when you truly embrace who you are, and I'm sure that you're instilling this in your girls, that's powerful. Like, I love the way I look. I love the way I limp. I love the way I walk. I love my body. And it took years to get there, but it doesn't need to. And so when you teach a child that, hey, you know what? You are unique. You are okay. You're special just the way you are. And so is everyone else. That's going to allow them not to want to be a follower, not to count how many likes they have or how many friends, and someone doesn't like them for their hair color, or when you can step into your power, you're not going to allow anyone to take it from you.
Yeah, and that we're powerful image bearers of our Heavenly Father, and that's how we have our dignity. That's the source of our dignity and our uniqueness and our specialness, and our embracing that is definitely the root of what builds a more confident person. And when you're confident in who you are, that means you're not insecure, and that's usually where bullying comes from. It's insecurity. And they displays of strength, and they believe is through exerting power over others. But in reality, it's a display that you're just deeply insecure person. And teenagers, man, that's a really hard age group to affect that change in, because, our brains at that age are not fully developed. And obviously having mentors and a strong father figure, strong mother figures in our life is really what gives us an anchor during that time where we just don't have the cognitive ability to. So I'm glad you're addressing it within teens, and especially teen boys. That's a really inspiring thing for you to use what was very deep struggle for you, and pay it forward to the next generation. So that's wonderful. So how do people find you and your mission?
Yeah, the best way to find me is like we all, kind of social media, right? Roz Slaughter is very simple, Rahz, last name Slaughter, just like the house, or you can check out the website at theunstoppablетeenager.com.
Yeah, okay. We're going to have all of this in the episode description and everything, so it'd be easy to find. But I mean, what an inspirational story. It's definitely had its twists and turns, but here you are, you've arrived, you're a married man with 2 beautiful boys, with a wonderful, successful career that is a passion, not just a path towards money. So that's wonderful. So I encourage everybody to come back for our next episode here soon. And thanks, Roz, for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nicole.